I've just come back from a heated debate about philosophy. The debate was, is philosophy actually bad? Is it a bad idea? And not to say that like we don't like philosophers and we don't like people with philosophical ideas, but like the whole enterprise. Like, is it just in practice actually doing harm? Because you know it's all nice in theory to be a philosopher, be a Spinoza, and have weird ideas about substance. But maybe it's just like unhelpful in the real world to like have to deal with people who are like real into philosophy, and they come up to you on the street and they're like, "Hey, bro, did you hear what Immanuel Kant said about like the nature of human experience?" And you're like, "Buddy, I'm trying to get to PB Tech to buy new headphones," and they're like, "Okay, but you know, in the year I don't know 500 BC, Plato said that headphones are a sin and should be banished from his republic because they promoted liars, and so." Just like how he was not okay with actors were going to be banished from his republic, so too was he not okay with musicians played through the medium of the headphone. Is that like the problem with philosophy? Am I actually contributing to some kind of like social harm by perpetuating the idea that it's actually okay at all to broadcast the thoughts of people like Spinoza? You know, why am I platforming Spinoza when I could be platforming people with real problems? These are all valid ethical concerns, and if you want to start kind of leaving my sphere of influence, then I don't blame you, frankly, because maybe that is the only ethical thing to do. But nonetheless, we're going to continue. Now, I can't remember what the heck I was saying about Spinoza before this. I do know that we got to try to hatch the sobble because I got to make some progress in the Pokemon too. We're trying to get a nice, perfect Inteleon, and once I get one, I'll do a battle with it and we can try it out. It's a really cursed format though on chip. It's singles. I mean, I guess I could play doubles, but I don't have like any Pokemon. Well, that's not true. I don't have any restricteds that are designed for 2-on-2 combat. All my things are bred for singles. Like their moves are singles moves. I could try to get some doubles Pokemon, but the Pokemon I'm breeding are for singles. So we're playing Battle Spot singles, but Battle Spot singles is like messed up right now. Like I don't know if it's playable because it's a too restricted format, and you bring 3 Pokemon. So you basically bring 2 legendaries and then like a third guy. I'm bringing Mewtwo, which is foolish. I should be bringing probably Calyrex, Shadow, and I'm bringing Koraidon, which is probably good, but it seems like Miraidon is the thing to beat. I could bring Miraidon, but the only Miraidon I have is this one I'm sitting on right now, and you know, he likes being a seat. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge if we ever hatch a perfect sobble. If I get a shiny one, I'll bottle cap it, and then can I deal with this, actually? Is my Moltres strong enough to beat a Toadstool? Yes. If I get a shiny Inteleon, I'll bottle cap it, and then I'll stop breeding. But in lieu of that day, we have some bad things. We're going to release them. I accidentally made a bunch of eggs with the wrong... without Destiny and Everstone equipped. And so some of these eggs are going to hatch into useless junk. But we don't mind useless junk. I mean, we will immediately send it to the glue factory. But the people need glue, I hear. The children yearn for glue. And who am I to deny the children their desires? We're going to turn some more sobble into glue. And come back to Spinoza. So Spinoza has shown through 2 lines of thinking that there is only one substance in the world, in existence. There's one substance, and all the things that we see are just modifications of that first substance. And now we're going to get to some really interesting Spinoza-type claims. For example, sorry, Abel's going a bit crazy in the corner. For example, Proposition 9. The more reality or being a thing has, the greater the number of its attributes. And Spinoza says, well, this is just true by definition, because we've defined being as having attributes. So the more attributes you have, the more reality you have. Now, let's go and just double check what definition 4 was, because that feels a bit crazy. Definition 4. By attribute, Spinoza means that which the intellect perceives as constituting the essence of substance. So Spinoza says the more things that the intellect perceives as constituting the essence of substance a substance has, the more reality it has. Now, I'll leave that one up to the viewer as to whether you buy it. I'm just going to grant it that yes, you can have kind of more or less reality, and in fact, if you have more attributes, you do have more reality. Next, Proposition 10. Each particular attribute of the one substance must be conceived through itself. So, as a reminder, we have one single substance, and it has an infinite number of attributes. That's because it's an infinite thing. It can't be finite, because then we could imagine something bigger than it, and if we could imagine something bigger than it, then it wouldn't be one thing, and because we only have one, therefore it must have infinite attributes. And it has to conceive of them through itself, because, says Spinoza, an attribute is that which the intellect perceives of as substance as constituting its essence, definition 4, and therefore must be conceived through itself, QED. So this is just a proof by definition. But Spinoza is going to give us a note. He says, note, oh, we've got a drizzle. Whoops. I've just given this thing like 2 unwanted EVs. Note, it is thus evident that though 2 attributes are in fact conceived as distinct, so 2 properties of some. You're bad. You're bad. Go home. Bashful. You're really bad. We don't like bashful creatures here. I'm so worried I'm going to release that Moltres instead of one of the sobble, and then be very, very sad, because that Moltres is a shiny that I caught in Pokemon Go and transferred in. And I remember when I caught it, I was on a walk with my lovely girlfriend in the park, and we fought the Moltres, and I got a shiny one and she didn't, and that was very sad for her. But it was okay for me, because I got the shiny. Should probably do this. There we go. Abel yearns for Spinoza. Abel does yearn for Spinoza. I could have, however, I didn't, unfortunately. I did not transfer the Moltres. And so it's helping me helping me hatch these eggs. And this Moltres is actually incredibly well versed in the philosophy of Spinoza, but it's also very taciturn, and so I don't want to press it on, meaningless questions like, is substance infinite? Because Moltres would be like, if you just had a bit less of a loose mind, you wouldn't have to ask. Anyway, it's evident that though 2 attributes are in fact conceived as distinct, that is, one without the help of the other, we cannot conclude that they constitute 2 entities or 2 different substances, for it's the nature of substance that each of its attributes is conceived through itself, inasmuch as all the attributes it has have always existed simultaneously in it, and none could be produced by any other, but each expresses the reality or being of substance. Moltres does seem very judgmental. Like, I can imagine going to like a book club and Maltrace is there, and you like have some real lukewarm take about the like romance novel that you've read, and Maltrace just kind of looks over at you with scornful eyes, and you realize that you shouldn't have come that day. You just should have stayed home, and then you never go back. That seems quite plausible. Anyway, back to the substance. It is then far from an absurdity to ascribe several attributes to one substance, for nothing in nature is more clear than that each and every entity must be conceived under some attribute, and that its reality or being is in proportion to the number of its attributes expressing necessity or eternity and infinity. Now, I disagree quite heavily with Spinoza on this claim, because I think there are things in nature that are more clear than that. I think that, for example, I think it's pretty clear that cats like to eat meat rather than rocks. I think that's pretty clear. I think it doesn't take that much sort of inductive science to discover that. Whereas I'm less convinced that it's clear that every entity must be conceived under an attribute, and that its reality or being is in proportion to the number of its attributes expressing necessity or eternity and infinity. However, Spinoza disagrees with me, and he says, consequently, it is abundantly clear that an absolutely infinite being must necessarily be defined as consisting in infinite attributes, each of which expresses a certain eternal and infinite essence. Oh, look, we've done it. Sniper? Ooh, torrent. Sorry, buddy. We don't want torrent. We want sniper. I could actually use torrent. I don't think it would affect the video, but sniper, for my own purposes, I'd rather have sniper sobble because it seems more fun. So, pretty close, my guy, but no cigar. And instead, you're on the chopping block. How good is the current one I'm breeding? As good as it's going to get. Okay, well, that's disappointing because we could have been successful, but instead that sobble is now deceased. Okay, so it's abundantly clear that an infinite being must be defined as consisting infinite attributes and so on. And if anyone now asks, by what sign shall he, I guess this person is one of the 20 men, what sign shall he be able to distinguish different substances? Let him read the following propositions. So you say, hi, man number 17, read the following propositions, which show there is but one substance in the universe, and that it is absolutely infinite. Wherefore, such a sign would be sought in vain. So this man is a fool. He's looking for a sign to tell substance apart. There's only one substance. Someone's got to tell him. But no one will, because unfortunately there's only 19 other men in the world, according to Spinoza. Okay. Now, suddenly we've got the first mention of God. So we didn't have God until now, but you can kind of see it's what Spinoza's been building towards, because he's been building up these godly characters like infiniteness and like having all attributes and these kind of things. And now he's going to explicitly equate God with substance. He's going to say substance and God are the same thing. And all of the rules he's been applying to substance are in fact rules that he's applying to God. So he's saying that God is infinite. There's only one God, and they're infinite, and God has all attributes. So any kind of trait you can imagine, God has that attribute and that attribute to a kind of infinite extent. So if you were wondering whether like God is spicy, for example, like if you licked God, would you feel the spice? The answer is yes, and to an infinite degree, an infinite amount of spice. However, because all things are substance with modifications, we are not infinitely spicy because we are a modification of the substance, and our modification is not that spicy unless you kind of cover us in chili powder or your spice of choice before cooking. Ooh, are you perfect? Sniper, timid. I'm not worried about getting 6 heavies. I'm not worried about getting the no attack as well, because I don't want to be here till the end of time. So I think we've done it. We've got our sobble, and we can. We have to level it up. We can go EV train it now. Now, does it need weird EVs? Let me. Oh, I'm doxing myself a little bit, but don't worry about that. We can go to. You can see my search history, which has glabrous included, because one of my wasps was pretty glabrous. We want to go to Team Builder. There we go. And here's our Intalion. Oh, you're into the California Reaper? Yeah, that's brave. I mean, it's he's so glabrous. It's very brave to maximally spice yourself, but I mean I respect it immensely. In fact, this Intalion is Torrent, so maybe I should write an apology to that other sobble that I destroyed, but I won't because I kind of like Sniper myself. It's more interesting. Speed and special attack. Okay, so now we got to check the map and try to find some outbreak with. Those guys don't look like they give those stats. Stealing could give speed, I suppose. Kachuritsu could give speed, but I'm not convinced. EVs have a kind of reliable, you can kind of predict based on like what the Pokemon itself prioritizes, but some of them are a bit weird. It's always a bit weird trying to figure out which Pokemon give special defense EVs, because a lot of the ones that like you might think would give special defense actually give. Solosis surely gives special attack. I've never seen a more specially attack-giving Pokemon. Alright, Solosis. You're public enemy number 1. I think it is a slimy baby. You're right. We'll get one day the slimy baby video will drop. I swear. It's an important future goal. But I have like many future goals. I need to make the updated how many Pikachu are possible. There's this video that I'm actually working on behind the scenes, getting these Pokemon. I could just like gen them in. That would be the efficient way to do it. But I don't know. There's something deep in me that makes me think I want to like do it legit. Mostly because it's kind of like zen, just breeding Pokemon. It's like a nice, relaxing way to wind down the day. Yeah, Gumi will obviously win, but I think, like any sport, you want to have some losers to make the winner look better by comparison. I think that's the motivation for sport, is to kind of make one person seem cooler. I was having an argument with my father about philosophy, because oftentimes, and I didn't bring it up. I just want to say I didn't be like, I'm making a video about Spinoza. It's just oftentimes my father will have a kind of instinctive reaction that he can't help, in a kind of like despairing way against philosophy, which I think is a pretty common reaction. I think that maybe the majority of people. Actually, we can just look at Solosis for a bit while I talk about this. Let me just put him on screen properly. I think that at least like I cancelled it. Oops. A plurality of people just react with like disgust at the thought of philosophy, and it's kind of fair because like you don't want to have to think about substance and this kind of stuff. It's kind of like, why am I listening to you, Spinoza? I feel like I got my own ideas and I don't need your Spinoza type ideas. But I quite like philosophy because it's interesting and because you kind of think, imagine if Spinoza was right. Wouldn't that be like weird? Um, and then you can kind of think about why you like it and why you don't. So I'm kind of pro philosophy, but my father is like not anti philosophy, but anti the the kind of institution of philosophy that exists in the world. Like he gets really annoyed when people start talking about philosophy or doing philosophy or being philosophers. So I was having a bit of an argument about whether, am I going that way? Whether sport was ethical or something. I can't really remember because it was minutes ago. But the question was something like, doesn't sport kind of produce like bad outcomes in people? Because when you have a competition where there's going to be a winner and a loser, what you often end up getting as a kind of like ecological consequence is teams. Teams where people's identity and people's feelings are dependent on this external force, this sports player, and where the other team is kind of demonized. And so you get these like tribalistic things arising just by nature of having two people competing to be a winner or a loser. And maybe we should just like reject sports as an institution. I was bringing this up to try to kind of unfairly trap my father into conceding that just because there are a lot of pretentious people who like philosophy to the point that they're really annoying to talk to, doesn't mean that philosophy is bad. It just means that the average philosopher is really annoying. Which I'm willing to concede that, like, probably talking about philosophy, like if you would do something crazy like make YouTube videos about Spinoza, probably does make you more annoying to deal with. It might be lowering my likability ratings to the average viewer, but sometimes you just got to die by your principles, I say. And I have the principle that I need to kill a lot of solosis to train the sobble up properly. So while I'm doing that, we're going to have to go back to Spinoza. Okay, so proposition 11. God, or substance, which we're equating, consisting of infinite attributes, of which each expresses eternal and infinite essentiality, necessarily exists. Okay, so Spinoza is asserting God is real. In fact, he's proven the existence of God, which is like wonderful, right? Because one of the troubles with talking about God is that it's very, very hard to prove anything, just by nature of the conversation. But Spinoza solved the problem. Spinoza says, well, we've defined substance as something that has all these properties, and it must exist. Therefore, God must exist. Okay, but that's a bold claim, right? You know, we've fought many wars over such things in history. How does he prove it? Well, the proof is pretty short. It's a counterfactual. He says, if you want to deny this proposition, conceive that God does not exist, that there is no God. Well, in that case, his essence would not involve existence. But it's absurd. God's essence definitely involves existence. Therefore, God must exist. So I mean that's it. Like we've solved it. We can kind of go home. God must exist because if he didn't exist, then his essence wouldn't exist, and that's absurd. But we've got another proof. So if you're not satisfied, we've got another one. And our other one's going to be a bit more broad. Of everything whatsoever, a cause or reason must be assigned, either for its existence or for its non-existence. So, if a triangle exists, we must grant a reason for its existence. If it doesn't exist, we must give a cause that prevents it from existing or annuls its existence. So, for example, unicorns don't exist, right? But we have to give a reason why unicorns don't exist. We can't just claim they don't exist. We need to give a cause. So one cause I can think of for unicorns not existing is the physics of being a unicorn is a bit difficult because you've got to be able to like prance through the sky, and it's quite hard. I don't know if you've tried. It's quite hard to prance and be a horse at the same time. And unicorns are, at the very least, horse-like, if not horses. Another reason they don't exist is because they never came to be. Oh, that's a Pegasus. No. Sorry, can unicorns not fly? I thought they could like run on like a rainbow that like appeared under their feet and kind of frolic. But I might be grievously mistaken because I'm not well versed in unicorn. I feel like they would have like sparkly hooves and they could kind of just run up into the sky. Oh shoot! I've misunderstood unicorns for many years. Okay, they can't fly. They just have magical powers and a horn. Okay. Well, in that case, it's going to be harder to think of a definition why they don't exist. Like, I can't think of a cause that would make them not exist because you can kind of be magic and have a horn at the same time. Lots of things do that. For example, rhinos. Rhinos are an example of that happening. So if rhinos can do it, I think unicorns can do it too. And anyway, since I can't think of a reason that annuls unicorns, I have to concede that they are real. The reason for non-existence must either be in the nature of the thing or be external to it. For example, the reason for the non-existence of a square circle is indicated in its nature, namely because that would involve contradiction. On the other hand, the essence of substance follows also solely from its nature, inasmuch as nature involves existence. But the reason for the existence of a triangle or a circle doesn't follow from the nature of those figures, because from the order of universal nature in extension. And that's because there's nothing inherent about a triangle or a circle that kind of definitionally means that it can or must or cannot exist. It's possible, it could exist, but it still might not, depending on, I guess, whether we draw it, if we're feeling particularly artistic that day, if we have any prejudice towards various shapes, and so on. So that's all good. Spinoza continues, it must follow either that a triangle necessarily exists, or that it is impossible that it should exist. This is self-evident. It follows therefrom that a thing necessarily exists, if no cause or reason be granted, which prevents its existence. So if we can't come up with any reason that a thing couldn't exist, then it must. There's no way for it possibly not to. So I'm going to have to work pretty hard on figuring out a reason for unicorns not to exist. Because if I can't do that, they must. Now, I'm being a bit facetious here. The reason for non-existence doesn't have to be understandable by me or by people. It could be some very esoteric, very complicated reason. But all we need to agree on is that, in theory, that reason exists. Okay. If then no cause or reason can be given which prevents the existence of God, or which destroys his existence, we must certainly conclude that he necessarily does exist. If such a reason or cause should be given, it must either be drawn from the very nature of God, or be external to him. That is, drawn from another substance of another nature. For if it were of the same nature, God by that very fact would be admitted to exist. So if we say, oh no, the reason that God doesn't exist is because there's something that's the same as God that prevents him from existing, well then we'd be admitting that that other thing was a God that does exist. But substance of another nature could have nothing to do with God by proposition 2, and therefore would be unable either to cause or to destroy his existence. So if two things are distinct, They can't have anything to do with each other. That's one of the... if that sounds a bit crazy, check out yesterday's stream VOD, because that's when we kind of dealt with that argument from Spinoza. As, then, a reason or cause which would annul the divine existence cannot be drawn from anything external to the divine nature, such cause must perforce, if God does not exist, be drawn from God's own nature, which would involve a contradiction. So it doesn't make any sense to say the reason that God doesn't exist is because of the nature of God. Because by kind of appealing to the nature of God, we're assuming that God exists. Therefore, neither in the nature of God nor externally to his nature can a cause or reason be assigned which would annul his existence. Therefore, God necessarily exists QED. Another proof. The potentiality of non-existence is a negation of power, and contrariwise, the potentiality of existence is a power, as is obvious. So, if you can exist, if you have the potential to exist, that is a power that you have. If, then, that which necessarily exists is nothing more than finite beings, such finite beings are more powerful than a being absolutely infinite. So we're saying finite beings have the ability to exist, but infinite beings don't have that ability. That doesn't make any sense, because infinite abilities have all the same properties of finite beings, but infinitely. So they can't be kind of weaker than finite beings in this domain. That's obviously absurd. Therefore, we've got two options. Either nothing exists, or else a being absolutely infinite necessarily exists also. Now, we exist in ourselves, or in something else which necessarily exists. So, it's definitely not the case that nothing exists. We can kind of disprove that because we exist. Therefore, a being absolutely infinite, in other words, God, necessarily exists. QED. Note, in this last proof, I have purposefully shown God's existence a posteriori, so that the proof may be more easily followed, not because from the same premises God's existence does not follow a priori. For, as the potentiality of existence is a power, it follows then that in proportion as reality increases in the nature of a thing, so also will it increase its strength for existence. Therefore, a being absolutely infinite, such as God, has from himself an absolutely infinite power of existence, and hence, he absolutely does exist. He exists more definitely than we do, because our existence is kind of a finite thing. Like, we might not exist, we could exist more. Not so for our God. God exists infinitely, and more. God exists more than us mere finite creatures. What am I looking for? I'm looking for something to defeat one Pokemon with. Perhaps, though, there will be many who will be unable to see the force of this proof. So if you're in the audience and you're thinking, I'm unable to see the force of this proof, inasmuch as I am accustomed, you might say, only to consider those things which flow from external causes. Of such things, they see that those which quickly come to pass, that is, come into existence, quickly also disappear, whereas they regard as more difficult the accomplishment that is not so easily brought into existence, those things which they conceive as more complicated. However, that's a misconception, and Spinoza is going to do away with it. He doesn't here need to show the measure of truth in the proverb, what comes quickly goes quickly. Nor does he need to discuss whether, from the point of view of universal nature, all things are equally easy or otherwise. He only needs to remark that he is not speaking of things which come to pass through causes external to themselves, but only of substances, which cannot be produced by any external cause. So he's not talking about the kinds of things that you and I are familiar with, which are typically brought about by other things, they're kind of modifications of some underlying substance. He's talking only about substance itself, which is produced internally by its own essence. Things which are produced by external causes, whether they have many parts or few, owe whatsoever perfection or reality they possess solely to the efficacy of their external cause, and therefore their existence arises solely from the perfection of their external cause, not from their own. Contrariwise, whatsoever perfection is possessed by substance is due to no external cause. Wherefore, the existence of substance must arise solely from its own nature, which is nothing else but its essence. Thus, the perfection of a thing does not annul its existence, but on the contrary, asserts it. Imperfection, on the other hand, does annul it. Therefore, we cannot be more certain of the existence of anything than of the existence of a being absolutely infinite or perfect, that is, of God. So we might feel pretty confident that we exist, that I exist, the stream exists, but we should feel more confident than that an infinite being made of substance called God exists. Because, inasmuch as his essence excludes all imperfection and involves absolute perfection, all cause for doubt concerning his existence is done away, and the utmost certainty on the question is given. So he exists the most, the infiniteness, and so there's no cause for doubt. And this, Spinoza thinks, is evident to every moderately attentive reader. Leading us to Proposition 12. No attribute of substance can be conceived from which it would follow that substance can be divided. Proof. The parts into which substance as thus conceived would be divided either will not retain the nature of substance, or they will. So they're either, we kind of got the substance, we're going to cut it into pieces, divide it into pieces. The two possibilities, either it will keep being substance, or it won't. It will become some other thing. If they will stay as substance, then, according to Proposition 8, each part, so each of the two bits of substance that you cut from the substance cake, will also necessarily be infinite and self-caused, and will consist of a different attribute, so that, in that case, several substances could be formed out of one substances, which by Proposition 6 is absurd. So we've already kind of established that there can only be one substance. So the idea of cutting up a substance into smaller subsubstances, oh my god, that's a hard word to say. She sells smaller subsubstances by the subsubstance, sure. That's not a good one to say with a lisp either. I challenge you viewers at home to use the word subsubstance in at least 17 different conversations in the next 24 hours as a kind of statement on the truth of the matter. Moreover, the parts of substance that we've generated, would have nothing in common with their whole, because two substances must be totally different from each other. And the whole could both exist and be conceived without its parts, which everyone will admit to be absurd. The other alternative, is we say, well, they just won't be substance anymore. Or, as Spinoza puts it, the parts will not retain the nature of substance. Then, if the whole substance were divided into equal parts, it would lose the nature of substance and would therefore cease to exist, because substance exists by its own nature and not by some external cause, which is also absurd, according to Proposition 7. Proposition 13, therefore, substance absolutely infinite is indivisible. Cannot be divided. Don't even try. If you think you want to try, then go home. I should probably train this dark cry up while I'm at it, because I think this also wants. Special attacking stats. Yeah. Dark cry, welcome aboard the training boat. You can have a power weight. Cool. And also we're going to use you to defeat some reunicluses. Oh, and I can maybe give you moves as well, now that I think about it. Dark Pulse, Ice Beam, Sludge Bomb, and Nasty Plot. Wow, you have a dreadful level up move pool, but we're 2/3 of the way to the moves here. We just need Ice Beam and Sludge Bomb. I would not be surprised if I'm out of Ice Beam TMs. Oh, I've got 3. Wow, good for me. Sorry, Dark Void, you need to go to bed, Grandpa. You were good once upon a time, but it has not been many moons. It has been many moons since then, and you are now old and decrepit and bad. But it's okay, because Darkrai lives on as a good, fast, strong special attacker in OU, so long to its Uber's career. But you know, being excellent and overused is pretty good going, all things considered, these days. Can I use Darkrai in... I presume I can't, right? It's like a mythical, so it won't work in the battle stadium. Let's have a look. Wow, Spinoza is dense. I feel like I've just said the same words over and over again. This, I guess, is kind of like... Oh, I ranked up. I don't know what this content is like. I think it's a bit niche. Like, if I'm being honest, I haven't watched much Spinoza content myself. Oh, eligible only. Oh, this is cool. Is it all going to show me non-eligible? Who's not eligible? I imagine it's just like Mew, Jirachi, Darkrai. Oh, I see. All of the Pokemon who aren't even in the decks. That's kind of cool. Poor Caterpie and Weedle and Pidgey. Okay, we'll come down to Darkrai. There's no Darkrai. That's very disappointing, because I'm allowed to use Pokemon. No, I've probably said substance more in the last 24 hours than I have in the rest of my entire life combined. Spinoza is... He's not shy to invoke substance at every given moment. Yeah, but I think, you know, that's what, like, reading historical text is about sometimes. It's just, like, unbearable unless you have a video game on the other screen so that you can kind of, you know, couch your struggles through a dense text with thoughts about slimy babies and such. Yeah, I mean, an editor would have helped. I don't know, it might have been a different time. I feel like a lot of this bit is him trying to kind of establish... It does apply to more recent fellows too. I think the editor is the true, like, hero of the literary world. The editor... Behind every good text is probably an editor, but unfortunately Spinoza was exiled, so he didn't have access to the editors of the publishing of the day. That's not a historical statement. That's hearsay against Spinoza. I have no idea what his publishing situation is, but for the purposes of comedy, this is satire. This is this is covered by something or other that makes it all good to I guess, besmirch and or exalt Spinoza. But yeah, imagine like you sit down to read in like class. You're a little Dutch child. You've gone to boarding school, and you sit down to read, and the teacher plonks Spinoza in front of you, and they're like, "I expect you to come back with a without loose thoughts and with a perfect understanding of substance." And you'd be like, "I suppose I can do that, but like, I feel like I feel like I kind of grant that like if this substance thing is like real in the way that Spinoza's describing it, then it would behave in this way. It's just a little hard to imagine that it is somehow." But that might be my 21st century brain rotted mind. I know, won't anyone think of the Dutch children? We're always thinking about the 20 men, but we're never thinking about the Dutch children, which make up like most of the rest of the people alongside the 20 men. We don't even know how many Dutch children there are, but there could be millions. If they have the perfect attribute of being a Dutch child, I think there might be an infinite number of them, which is a terrifying thought because that means that there's an infinite amount of propositions 1 through 13 of Spinoza to read, which is a big danger in this day and age. Okay, but let's come back to proposition 13. Substance, absolutely infinite, is indivisible. So we've said that we can't divide it. Here's kind of the follow-up. It's indivisible. If it could be divided, the parts would either have the nature or they wouldn't. If the former, we'd have several substances of the same nature, which is absurd. If the latter, then substance infinite could cease to exist, which is also absurd. Corollary, it follows that no substance, and by extension, no extended substance, insofar as it is substance, is divisible. So we can divide the properties and the modifications of substance into smaller parts. Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of children. We can divide the modifications into parts, but the actual substance itself is one and is eternal. Spinoza says if we're having trouble, we can understand this indivisibly more easily as followed. The nature of substance can only be conceived as infinite, and by a part of substance, we can't imagine anything else other than finite substance. So like an amount of substance that there could be more of, which involves a contradiction if we return to proposition 8. Okay, proposition 14, this is where it gets. I know, Solosis is also a really good slimy baby, isn't it? It's pretty wonderful. I feel like there are some Pokemon that you kind of like accept and then you look closely at and you're like, hang on, isn't this creature actually like phenomenal? And Solosis is one of those where I didn't respect it for quite a long time. And then I think something about just like the way its mouth works suddenly brought me immense joy, and I pivoted to being a Solosis enjoyer. It's always a bit underwhelming to actually use because it's so slow, but it's really cute. It's really funny. Okay, anyway, next we're saying that we can't conceive of any substance other than God because getting a perfect run in Pokemon Go tends to either make you suddenly respect something or make you like despise it even more when you realize that it's terrible and you wish you could have gotten an actually good perfect one. Okay, more substances. You'd think we'd like move on to another thing, but we're still just going. God's a being who's absolutely infinite. No attribute that expresses the essence of substance can be denied of God, and God necessarily exists. If we granted a substance besides God, it would have to be explained by some attribute of God, because God has all the attributes that are to do with substance. And thus, two substances with the same attribute would exist, which is absurd by proposition 5. Therefore, we can't grant any substance beside God, or even conceive of any substance besides God. If it could be conceived, it would necessarily have to be conceived as existence, because it has the property, because substances are created by their own properties. But this is absurd by the first part of the proof. Therefore, besides God, no substance can be granted or conceived. Corollary. Clearly, therefore, God is one. That is, only one substance can be granted in the universe, and that substance is absolutely infinite, as we have already indicated. It follows, too, that extension and thought are either attributes of God or, by axiom 1, accidents of the attributes of God. I've been told that I would like to try to erase all the rocks from the universe, and that is true. I'm a known rock eraser, but I don't know if Spinoza would do that, because there's a sense in which rocks are made of the one substance, the only substance, and so it would be kind of cruel to erase them all, or in fact it might even be absurd. So, besides God, corollary 2, as we say, extension and thought are attributes of God. So God has all attributes and has them infinitely, and so extension and thought are two important attributes that God has. Proposition 15, whatever is in God, and without God nothing can be or be conceived. So God is substance, and substance is the only thing. We only have substance and its modifications. So, therefore, we can't grant any other substance or even conceive of any substance that is nothing, which is in itself and is conceived through itself. I know. Well, you might think that it's not real English, but unfortunately it is. It has a real meaning that people believe. You might doubt it. I might doubt it. I might be thinking, I feel like I've said the word substance so many times that it has lost its meaning, and so I'm losing a lot of important lexical content from Spinoza's writing because I've said substance too much. But that's one of the perils of reading Spinoza is losing grasp of reality and your own life. Okay, but let's power through, because modes, by definition 5, can neither be nor be conceived without substance. So modes are properties of a substance, wherefore they can only be in the divine nature and can only through it be conceived. But substances and modes form the sum total of existence, according to axiom 1. Therefore, without God, nothing can be or be conceived, QED. And then you have it. So because substance and modes are the only things that exist, and because God and substance are the same thing, then the modes of everything that we experience, so like I have the mode of sitting in this chair and being named parasitoid pod or something, those only exist as modes of God, who is substance and such. But we've got to note, Spinoza, some people assert that God, like a man, consists of body and mind and is susceptible of passions. So some people want to say God kind of has the form of, we've got an axiom 2 enjoyer in chat. Chat, is this real? An axiom 2 enjoyer? That's pretty bold. I mean, I don't know if we can. Well, some people claim that God is one of the 20 men. That's a common claim. He has a body and mind like the other 19 men, and he feels the passions, he feels emotions, he feels love, he feels hate. How far such persons have strayed from the truth is sufficiently evident from what has been said. So these people who think that God has a body and kind of made man in his image and men look like God, they're so far wrong from the truth. God is not one of the 20 men, and how dare you suggest that God might be one of the 20 men? No. All who have in any wise reflected on the divine nature deny that God has a body. Of course, they find excellent proof in the fact that we understand by body a quantity. A body is so long, so broad, so deep, bounded by a certain shape. And it's the height of absurdity to predicate such a thing of God, of being absolutely infinite. So if God is sort of infinitely large, well, he couldn't be a man, because men kind of have boundaries, right? Like at the top of a man, you have the hair; at the bottom, you have the grubby toes, and because God's infinite, like you could keep traveling down the leg of God forever, and you'd never even reach the shin. That's how big God is. So to imagine God as having a body is just utterly absurd, according to Spinoza. But meanwhile, by other reasons with which they try to prove their point, they show that they think corporeal or extended substance wholly apart from the divine nature, and say it was created by God. So they say, well, these men, right, these 20 men, were made by God. So they're not God, but God created them. They kind of were a product of this divine thing. But they are wholly, but when they say that, they are wholly ignorant. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Wherefrom the divine nature can have been created, they are wholly ignorant, semicolon. So these people who posit that God created the men don't have any place where they think that the divine nature came from. And this clearly shows that the people who say this don't know the meaning of their own words. They kind of don't speak good English. Sorry, that was cut off on the screen a bit. My bad. It was just Spinoza throwing some shade at people who think that the men are not divine, not made of the divine substance, which of course they are. Spinoza himself has proved sufficiently clearly, at any rate in his own judgment, that no substance can be produced or created by anything other than itself. Further, he showed in Proposition 14 that besides God, no substance can be granted or conceived. Hence, we drew the conclusion that extended substance is one of the infinite attributes of God. However, in order to explain more fully, Spinoza will refute the arguments of his adversaries, which all start from the following points. So Spinoza has some adversaries. They disagree on sort of the nature of substance and the men, and the 20 men, and this kind of stuff. Ooh, my Intellion is done. So let's take a Spinoza break, one of the important breaks, to give this Intellion a... What does he want? He wants 4 SPDEF EVs. So we want to give him a little SPDEF item. Now you can tell that Intellion is finite, because if you go down its legs enough, you reach its feet, which would not happen with God. That would be absurd to claim that happened if you went down God's legs. Okay, there we go. And we'll just defeat one more Solosis. Okay, so these are the arguments of Spinoza's adversaries. These are people who disagree. They think that the divine nature is different to the substance of men, and, all these other ridiculous things. Here are their points. Extended substance, insofar as it is substance, consists, as they think, in parts. Wherefore, they deny that it can be infinite, or consequently, that it can appertain to God. So substance is made of lots of different parts, according to Spinoza's adversaries, and because of that, it can't be infinite, And so it can't be kind of the same thing as God. God has to be something else, and God makes these finite things out of substance, which are not divine in themselves, but they are divinely created. This they illustrate with many examples, and Spinoza is going to give us one or two. If substance, they say, is infinite, let it be conceived to be divided into two parts. Each part will then be either finite or infinite. If the former, the infinite substance is composed of two finite parts, which is absurd. If the latter, then one infinite will be twice as large as another infinite, which is also absurd. So Spinoza does not agree that you can have different sizes of infinity. Spinoza says, if something's infinite, then it's infinite. And he does not agree with, like, mathematicians who want to say, well, you know, you can have, like, big infinities, and then you can have, like, really big infinities. Spinoza's not into that. He says that's absurd. His favorite thing to do in general when he doesn't like someone else's opinion is to call them absurd. And in this case, the mathematicians are absolutely being absurd. Further, if an infinite line, so we've got an infinite line, maybe we're drawing a line down God's leg, if we were to measure it out in foot length, so like a normal foot, I live in a metric system, so if you're from a metric system country, then foot usually means meter, which is a unit of measurement that you might be more familiar with. But we'll go with foot because that's what Spinoza is used to, because he's Dutch. Imagine we're drawing an infinite line in foot lengths down God's leg. That line will consist of an infinite number of such parts. It would also consist of an infinite number of parts that each measured only an inch. Therefore, one infinity, the number of parts of God's leg that were feet, would be 12 times as great as the number of parts of God's leg that were only an inch long. Which is absurd, right? I mean, Spinoza hasn't said it yet, but I'm imagining he might. Lastly, if a single point there be drawn, if from a single point there be conceived to be drawn two diverging lines, which at first are a definite distance apart, but are produced to infinity, it is certain that the distance between the two lines will be continuously increased until at length it changes from definite to indefinable. So if I start, off in a spaceship in one direction, and you start off in a spaceship in a different direction, to begin with, we're going to be able to measure how far apart we are. But if we kept kind of going infinitely, eventually we would be infinitely far apart from one another. Now that sounds a little dubious to me. It sounds like we would have a sort of be approaching the mathematical limit of infinity, but I'm not sure we would ever get there, because that would imply that we would reach an infinitely long amount of time. But it seems like no matter how long you spend doing something, it's never going to be infinitely long. But that might be me showing my ignorance, or it might just be that we've come further than Spinoza in terms of our conception of what infinity means in the years since he died. And if he'd lived to be 400, then I'm sure he would have an excellent rebuttal for the problem of infinity. Anyway, at length, the distance between these 2 points will be indefinable. As these absurdities follow, it is said, from considering quantity as infinite, the conclusion is drawn that extended substance must necessarily be finite, and consequently cannot appertain to the nature of God. The second argument is also drawn from God's supreme perfection. God, it is said, inasmuch as he is a supremely perfect being, cannot be passive. But extended substance, insofar as it is divisible, is passive. It follows, therefore, that extended substance does not appertain to the essence of God. Such are the arguments that Spinoza finds on the subject in writers who, by them, try to prove that extended substance is unworthy of the divine nature and cannot possibly appertain thereto. So these are people who want to say, well, there's God and there's kind of that divine realm, and then there's like the physical world, and the physical world is something different. It's finite, it's non-divine, it's substance, but it's like a different substance, or something absurd like that. However, Spinoza thinks attentive readers will see that he has already answered their propositions, for all their arguments are founded on the hypothesis that extended substance is composed of parts. So, God's leg, an extended substance, is composed of parts of God's leg, right? You can break it down into like thigh, knee, shin, bit of thigh, bit of shin, and so on. I'm trying to find my choice specs at the same time, which is distracting me. Where are my choice specs? Which of you is holding my specs? I dropped my glasses, everybody. Pause the stream. I've dropped my glasses. Someone's picked them up. Here they are. Ricky Mick has them. Let's take them off Ricky Mick. There we go. Throw on my... leftovers. Yeah, Ricky Mick, I know. He's a notorious glasses thief. I need to... I'm just going to adjust these because I'm going to take a break from the Spinoza in a moment because I've really substanced myself out, and then I'll do a battle with our new Intellion that we have created against all odds. Thanks to the power of Spinoza's ethical help, we've kind of indoctrinated this Intellion to be pristine, to be amazing. I mean, there's lots of things that this Intellion is, and all of them are good. I think we want a choice band for our Coridon. Oh, that battle team is locked. I can unlock that battle team. I may have to by opening up the friendly competition thingy. Thanks, Spinoza. Yeah, I think it's important that we thank Spinoza often, probably consistently. Is there like a way I can make my Coridon beat Miridon? I feel like that would be helpful. Focus Sash? That would let it survive a hit. Let's try Focus Sash, because I'm not too worried about perfection today. I'm not too worried about making... Here we go. Spinal Cage has my Focus Sash. We'll give this to... Right on. There you go. Okay, so who's on our battle team? We want Clodsire, Spinoza, and Intellion. And then we want two restricteds. I've got a Calyrex, which I should be using instead of Mewtwo, really. Mewtwo is like washed up Calyrex, I think. But I don't know where my Calyrex... Here he is. Yeah, you're what I want. And you can have... And then I also kind of want you, actually. Held items. I need to actually pick up the Calyrex. Oh, wait, I could use Howard. Ooh. Yeah, let's use Howard and Calyrex. Very special if we do this. I'll bring Howard over, but who was Spinoza's main opponent? That's an excellent question that I don't know the answer to. I think it was kind of everybody. I don't think he was well liked. I think because you can see that like he kind of started off like trying to help out with like God, but then he quickly said, "Oh no, all of you people who believe in God your way are wrong." But I don't know. I don't know who his like when he says adversaries. He must be talking to someone, but I don't know who he's talking to, which really outs me as a Spinoza fraud in the arena of Pokemon YouTubers. I'm sure that there are hundreds of thousands of men and Dutch children who know, who are more well versed in Spinoza than I in this field. But you're stuck with me, unfortunately. So I want Gliscor. Yeah. Where'd I put my Inteleon? Help, I dropped my Inteleon. Where'd he go? He was all ready for action. Now I've lost him. Here he is. Come with me. And you can replace... Oh, you're on the team already. Okay. In that case, we are golden. Okay, let's finish off with this Spinoza versus his opponents thing. Yeah. The church was probably the main antagonist, but he might have had some kind of contemporary rivals. I'll look that up for future streams because that way we can really get into the mind of him and to figure out what he was thinking when he came up with all of these hallucinatory ideas. Okay, so he says that he's answered all the propositions of their adversaries because the propositions involve breaking down substance into parts, which is absurd. Moreover, anyone who reflects will see that all of these absurdities, if absurdities they be, which he's not now discussing, he's already dealt with that, from which it is sought to extract the conclusion that extended substance is finite, do not at all follow from the notion of an infinite quantity, but merely from the notion that an infinite quantity is measurable and composed of finite parts therefore. The only fair conclusion to be drawn is that infinite quantity is not measurable and cannot be composed of finite parts. So you can't measure God's leg. It's an incoherent, or Spinoza would say absurd idea to try to measure the length of God's leg. Which is exactly what we've already proved in Proposition 12. Wherefore, the weapon which they aimed at us has in reality recoiled upon themselves. If, from this absurdity of theirs, they persist in drawing the conclusion that extended substance be finite, they will in good sooth be acting like a man who asserts that circles have the properties of squares, and, finding himself thereby landed in absurdities, proceeds to deny that circles have any centre, from which all lines drawn to the circumference are equal. For, taking extended substance... I'll scroll down. For taking extended substance... Where am I? Which can only be conceived as infinite, one, and indivisible, they assert, in order to prove that it is finite, that it is composed of finite parts, and that it can be multiplied and divided. So, also, after asserting that a line is composed of points, others can produce many arguments to prove that a line cannot be infinitely divided. Assuredly, it is not less absurd to assert that extended substance is made up of bodies or parts than it would be to assert that a solid is made up of surfaces, a surface of lines, and a line of points. This must be admitted by all who know clear reason to be infallible, and most of all, by those who deny the possibility of a vacuum. So Spinoza here outs himself as a vacuum disbeliever. So we don't believe in vacuum cleaners. Spinoza famously didn't believe in the vacuum cleaner. He preferred to clean up the dust in his room by inhaling it, because vacuum cleaners were absurd and not welcome in Spinoza's estate. That's hearsay. I don't think they had vacuum cleaners back in the time. Okay. 4, he says, if extended substance could be so divided that its parts were really separate, so if you could cut God's leg up into lots of different bits, why should not one part admit of being destroyed, the others remaining joined together as before? So why shouldn't you be able to destroy, like, just God's upper left thigh, but keep the rest of the leg intact? And why should all be so fitted into one another as to leave no vacuum? Surely in the case of things which are really distinct from one another, one can exist without the other, and can remain in its individual condition. As, then, there does not exist a vacuum in nature, of which anon, but all parts are bound to come together to prevent it, it follows from this that the parts cannot really be distinguished, and that extended substance, insofar as it is substance, cannot be divided. Okay, but we've got a few more paragraphs of Spinoza defending this point, and once we're done with this proposition, we'll go off. This one is clearly a sticking point for Spinoza because he's spending a lot of time fighting his adversaries over it. He says, if anyone asks me the further question, why are we naturally so prone to divide quantity? Spinoza answers that quantity is conceived by us in 2 ways, in the abstract and superficially as we imagine it, or as substance, as we conceive it solely by the intellect. If, then, we regard quantity as it is represented in our imagination, which we often and more easily do, we will find that it is finite, divisible, and made of parts. However, if we regard it as is represented in our intellect, and conceive it as substance, which is very difficult to do, we shall then, as he has proved, find that it is one, infinite, and indivisible. This will be plain enough to all who make a distinction between the intellect and the imagination. We're up to here. Especially if it be remembered that matter is everywhere the same, that its parts are not distinguishable, except insofar as we conceive matter as diversely modified, whence its parts are distinguished not really, but modally. So we can differentiate between water and orange juice, they're different kinds of matter, but they're still made of the same stuff. They're still made of atoms and molecules. They're just different modes of those underlying objects. For instance, water, insofar as it is water, we conceive to be divided, and its parts to be separated from one from the other. So, we have the sea, and we have the water in our cups, and we have lots of different, bits of water. However, this is not so insofar as water is substance. From this point of view, water is neither separated nor indivisible. So what we're doing here is kind of imagining the concept of water, or the idea of water, the waterness of water. And when we imagine just waterness, well, waterness doesn't really have dimensions. It's not like there's some amount of waterness. Waterness is just the attribute that water has that is applied to specific types of matter that are called water. Water, insofar as it is water, is produced and corrupted, but insofar as it is substance, it is neither produced nor corrupted. Spinoza thinks that he has now answered the second argument. It's in fact founded on the same assumption as the first, namely that matter, insofar as it is substance, is divisible and composed of parts. Even if it were so, Spinoza doesn't know why it should be considered unworthy of the divine nature, inasmuch as besides God no substance can be granted, wherefrom it could receive its modifications. All things, Spinoza repeats, are in God, and all things which come to pass solely through the laws of the infinite nature of God, and follow, as he will shortly show, although we won't be getting to that tonight, follow from the necessity of his essence. Whether it can in no wise be said that God is passive in respect to anything other than himself, or that extended substance is unworthy of the divine nature, even if it be supposed divisible, so long as it is granted to be infinite and eternal. But enough of this for the present, says Spinoza, and I kind of agree, because I think that I'm losing my substance, and I'm losing my essence, and I'm entering a new mode of existence. So let's kind of pause for a moment, take a Spinoza break, and have a little battle. We may lose because I don't have like necessarily a good team, but I do have a team, and we're going to use. Oh wait, can I cancel this? I can't cancel this. I forgot to name the Intellion, which is a critical component. I think the name is Claire, and maybe it should be Substance. However, if you in chat have a better name than Substance, or I guess in the comments if you're watching the VOD, if you're watching the VOD and you kind of willingly clicked on this and then decided to sit through, I guess it's kind of like a bad audiobook, like a low quality audiobook about Spinoza interjected with me taking long pauses to stare into the void and also talk about EVs, then that's pretty brave of you, is all I can say. We're gonna lead, kind of like lead Intellion, and then we'll bring. It seems kind of cowardly to bring both. I guess Origin Poet's kind of bad into Tinglu. They've got 3 dark types. We won't bring Origin Poet, we'll bring Fork Pat. And Golden Go, Weak to Fire. Scarf's kind of nice though. Spinoza, is Spinoza any good? No, they got a Chiyu. Yeah, I don't really like the ground types. We're gonna do this. We battled with Spinoza yesterday, so we don't have to bring Spinoza today. Yeah, chat, you're welcome to come up with a name for Intellion if you like, but otherwise I'm going to call it Substance, my new favourite word. I have no idea what Eternatus does. I presume it beats Intellion, but it's kind of interesting to find out. I don't have a calc up or anything. Do you think this thing just one-shots me? Do you think it's faster than me? I'm pretty fast. Terra Water. Do you think it's faster than me? Dragon Poison. But it gets Flamethrower, so Golden Go's only so good. I reckon we're just going to go for it with the Ice Beam. I mean, probably takes it. Oh, but it's just going for T-Spikes. T-Spikes, I mean, is respectable, but it's pretty slow in a battle where we only get 3 Pokemon each. I mean, I'm happy with this. I'm clicking Ice Beam again. And I'll deal with the consequences later. It makes me wish I'd brought Clodsire, because then I could switch it in and get rid of the spikes. Ho-Oh, I don't know if that is going to do it for you, my friend. Okay, I was wrong. It does it for you. We're going to switch straight into Koraidon. Switching to Golden Go seems bad. I'm switching to Coridon. Focus Sash proves to be useless. But that's okay. We forgive Coridon. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in. I know that the demographic of people who want to watch Pokemon with Spinoza over the top is very, very low. But I've decided that I've hit 1,000 subscribers. I've monetized the channel, and now I never need to make a profit from that monetization. I can just... Is this Fluttermane? Probably. Back to Eternatus. Wait, that seems terrible. I mean, I'm locked into Outrage. If they have Fluttermane, they can just kill Coridon for free. But I don't mind that. I think that puts me in a good spot, because if they go into Fluttermane, click Dazzling Gleam, I can go into Golden Go, Scarf Golden Go, click Steel Move, and then... Or I can double switch to Inteleon, actually. Yeah, okay. This is fine. We don't mind losing Coridon here. I don't think it's worth terrestrializing to save myself. It's got a Moonblast. I wonder if I lose. I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'm Scarf, but they're Booster Energy, so they'll outspeed. I think I Terra here. I do think I Terra to no longer be weak to Ghost. Yeah. Oh, they're going into Hoa. That's understandable, but now they've lost their booster energy on Fluttermane, which means my Golden Go suddenly outspeeds their Fluttermane and hits it with a nice Shadow Ball, which I like. I'm dubious of Inteleon's ability to switch into a strong move from Ho-Oh, but I think I'm going to have to try, and then... Wow! I'm really weak. That did absolutely nothing. Okay, that's very bulky. We have to switch. I think we'll probably lose. The sun is actually annoying. I can see that bringing Coridon and Inteleon was a bad combination, because I put the sun up to weaken my own Inteleon. I'm going to do half damage. But see, it was all part of my plan, because the sun has faded, and Inteleon is about to click Specs Snipe Shot. Oh, they had a light screen up. I forgot about that. Okay, so that's why my Golden Go did so little damage. I was a bit worried. My, the sun's down, the light screen's down, my Inteleon is ready to go, and he's just going to snipe this Fluttermane. If I get a crit, then it's like amazing, because I've got Sniper, but I'm not running Scope Lens. I'm just running... Ooh, this is a bit close, actually. Because... Do I need a Snipe Shot? Maybe I do. Yeah, maybe I do. This might be a throw. I'm uncertain. Okay. And then, we presume they're going to... they might stay in, because they might not think I'm Scarf. But I'm going to hard read the switch, because I think if they stay in... I think switching just looks so obvious here, because they know that I do like 0 damage to them with Shadow Ball. Drat. I overpredicted. I thought they were going to switch. I would have killed... Right, but now I've given them Scarf. Okay, well, that's embarrassing. That was a very bad move by me. I've just let them sweep me. But, to be fair, I just felt like they were going to switch. And if they'd switched and I didn't trick, then the Hori would have taken like a little bit of chip, and then I think they would have just won the battle. Whereas if they switched and got tricked, I might have had a way out. Alas. But maybe that's dreaming, now that I think about it, because I might have lost anyway. And they didn't know I was Scarf, so, like, thinking that they outspeed me, it makes sense just to take the kill. So we lose, and that is unfortunate, but it's the way it goes in Pokemon sometimes. And the important thing to remember is that all of this game, us, the opponent, our Pokemon, our items, they're all just modifications of one substance. So in a way, we actually won that battle just as much as we lost it. Good night, everybody.